If you are the owner or the operator or the GM of a seasonal restaurant, you need to be thinking and looking at yourself as like a college football coach that's always trying to recruit and thinking about recruitment, recruitment, recruitment. So that's such a big thing that I do in the off season.
Most restaurant owners think of themselves as restaurant owners, when in reality, what restaurant owners really are is they are recruiters, marketers, and executives. And here's why I say the recruiting is so important, is because you can never leave the kitchen if you don't have the right team. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Accelerator podcast. I am your host, Andrew Scott from OwnerShift, multi-location owner for almost 20 years, and now we help restaurant owners grow their sales, their profitability, and their free time so they can open more locations and do the things that they love to do, and especially the things they dreamed about before they got into the restaurant business in the first place. So today I've got a special treat for everybody. We've got Benjamin Devlin here, and he is a seasonal restaurant owner, but a multi-restaurant owner. And so we're gonna dive into his journey a little bit, because he's had some crazy shit happen. Literally, like places lighting on fire. Like just there's no shortage of things. You know, I'm sure there's been staff that have caused a ruckus in town sometimes, especially in a small community. But there's also a lot of lessons that he's learned over the years that I really wanted to share with you guys. So that's why I wanted to bring Ben on. So Ben, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always happy to hop on and chat with you.
Awesome. So I want to go back to the start, because obviously you've got a seasonal restaurant. We're going to be sharing some tips for seasonal restaurants, because obviously it's a different animal and a little bit of a complicated beast. But I want to go back to the start. How did you even get into, restaurant ownership to begin with? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was actually working in a traveling water ski stunt show, and then I had to pay for university. So as many of us often find ourselves.
Okay, let's stop for a second. Okay. Traveling water ski stunt show. Okay, I want to start there.
Yeah, so I was a competitive water skier growing up as a kid, and so I got into that a little bit into my high school days, and then started working in Muskoka, which is where we now have the restaurant, which is like the Hamptons of Ontario. And I had to pay for university. And as many of you may be able to gather, being a ski bum is not very apt to paying your university tuition. So I got into the restaurant business. And when I made more serving in one day than I did an entire week of teaching water skiing, I hung up my skis, so to speak. And I got into the restaurant business. So from there, climbed my way up, became manager. And then when I graduated, became the general manager, operating partner, and that was my first location. It happened to be owned by the CEO of the company at the time. It was a flagship location, and so we brought it to new heights, and then went to multiple locations.
Okay, so there's a lot to dive in there, but first, one thing I want to clarify is Muskoka. For everyone listening that's in the U.S., for example, Muskoka is kind of like cottage country in Canada, because we have summer that lasts all of like 2 days. Basically, it's a really, really beautiful place. So as Ben mentioned, that the Hamptons of that area is a very, very nice area. Definitely like a high income area for everyone that has their cottages there and stuff like that. And so basically that's kind of where you got your start. So you worked your way up, and so how long did that take you from like the time when you started to the time when you actually got into being an operating partner there?
So it's a seasonal restaurant. So in the off season, I would always go back to my university town and pick up different skill sets, work in different restaurants, and that really helped me get a breadth of knowledge instead of a depth. It was really a broad. I did everything from sushi restaurants to dive bars, and so that took about 6 years, I would say, until I took over, and then I've been in the on the ownership side for about 6 years now.
Okay, fair enough. And so I want to dive into this a little bit, because having a seasonal restaurant's a very, very different animal. But I also know that from the time you took over, you kept growing things every year, things kept improving. And so walk me through some of those initial challenges you had. Like, what are the things that you faced that, you weren't sure how to handle? Just walk me through some of those things. Like year one, what was going on?
So I think one of the big disclaimers, and plant a flag here, is that and I think this is probably true for a lot of seasonal restaurant owners, is that staffing is continually going to be an issue. Number one, churn is going to be high just through people are looking for year-round gigs, so you're going to be churning over more than otherwise you would be. And so we had to figure out a way to limit that. And just staffing levels overall. I think you have these seasonal towns. And so trying to find, everyone is kind of competing. We have a smaller labor market and labor to pull from, say, a big urban city. And so you're always competing for that local talent. So one of the biggest changes that we made, and one of the reasons why I think that we are the largest and longest restaurant in our location, is because we looked at staff housing as a loss leader. And so we lose money. It's I need the problems like I need a hole in the head. But that is the part that I need in order to scale the business to a level where we can actually squirrel away enough profit to, have enough acorns, over the winter.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
No, I mean, it does for me, because I know we've had this conversation before, but staff housing is probably a new concept for a lot of people. So what is staff housing? What does that look like? Just walk me through that.
Yeah, so, I mean, in a perfect world, what you would do is, if you had a 10-year lease, go out and buy a place if you have the capital to be able to do that, because by the end of your 10-year lease, you're going to be able to stack away a nice chunk of property, and that could be a great exit plan for you. But if you don't have that type of capital available, just go around and find, pound the pavement and find some leases that make sense for you, and try to defer payments as much as humanly possible, because cash flow in a seasonal restaurant is always, always, always going to be a problem. You're going to need a lot of startup capital every single year. And so housing only compounds that issue, because you're going to need first and last and all that thing. But if you do it correctly, and what we've learned over the years is that it's a simple formula, right? It's heads and beds. So we know, generally speaking, what we can charge staff, and we know the loss rate. So what it takes is go out, sign a few leases, and try to work with your housing providers to delay payments to when you have cash flow as much as humanly possible. And then go out and get a good sublease agreement. And so that you can, you get your staff to sign that. They give you first and last, just like you would with any other. We separate the two companies, which is very, very important for legal reasons and for liability. Then we go collect first and last, and then we pull off of their paychecks, rent. So it's a lot of work. But again, there's a big strategic advantage. In July and August, which is our peak season, everyone is going to be fighting to get the staff. So, hey, we'll pay you a few extra dollars if you just come for peak season, because we're desperate for staff. But if you own their housing, then they can't really leave, can they? They can't just jump for a few extra dollars, or else they don't have the housing. So, yes, it's a lot of problems. Yes, we lose money doing it. But I think is one of the biggest things and biggest reasons why we've been so successful over the years.
Yeah. So, I mean, and so what would happen, like, before you had this stuff? My assumption was that you were always just searching for staff. You were always running short. Stuff was more hectic. You probably had much longer waits, because then at your peak season, you could only handle a certain amount of volume. So therefore you end up losing money that way. And so your way to figure this out is like, hey, why don't we find housing for these people and then be able to recruit them? And so, that's an idea that I hadn't heard of before I had met you, again, because, seasonal restaurants wasn't something. I mean, all restaurants are seasonal, but yours literally closed down. So it's like literally they don't exist anymore for that period of time, yet you do have expenses that are, accumulating over the winter months. But so you need to make enough in the summer, otherwise you don't make it. But let me ask you this. Who in their right mind goes and moves somewhere for the summer to work in a restaurant?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And I think that hits on the second thing that really over the last few years I've been turned on to this. So I was sitting and having a meeting with, and having a beer with someone who is head of HR for a big resort. And I'm like, look, like, what do you guys do to really get like enough staff to staff kitchens? Really, we're going to get enough applications for servers, bartenders, all that kind of stuff. That's not where the crunch comes. The crunch comes for seasonal staff in the kitchen. To give a perspective, we hire 125 people a year. So we don't just need one or two. We need many. And so what he described to me was a process that really turned on a light, and I think really turned a corner to take our business from profitable to really, really good over the last few years. And so what that is really, if you are the owner or the operator or the GM of a seasonal restaurant, you need to be thinking and looking at yourself as a recruitment. Picture yourself as like a college football coach that's always trying to recruit and thinking about recruitment. So that's such a big thing that I do in the off season. I go insofar as I go to speak to schools in our area. And by our area, I mean, 2-3 hours away. So I go to speak to students in culinary about what we do. I make videos and really attractive and build a culture that, number one, is going to limit churn. But also I go to get approved at co-ops. I speak at schools all the time. I'm always speaking at schools, developing relationships. If they're doing any type of competition, I want to be a judge on the panel that's judging dishes. And so really in getting approved for those co-ops. So what we do is we say, hey, listen, you have a co-op, we're going to pay you for your co-op. We're going to pay you just like anyone else would pay you, but also you're going to get the added benefit of co-op. But the twist is that, listen, you got to move up, we got to pay rent, and you got to go into staff housing, but you're going to have the summer of your life. You're going to get paid for your co-op. Check. All of a sudden, it starts making a lot of sense for them. And that's what's really, really turned things in our favor to take it to the next level.
Yeah, because otherwise you're just running short all the time. So this is a really interesting thing. Now, I'm picturing a couple things, happening in restaurant owners' minds who are listening to this, like, where do I find the time for that? How do I do that? But at the end of the day, keep in mind that it is a seasonal restaurant. So in the off season, like that is your job, realistically, right? But the other side of things too is what I love is that you're picturing yourself as a college sports coach, just literally looking for that talent. And here's what is different, is that most restaurant owners think of themselves as restaurant owners, when in reality, what restaurant owners really are is they are marketers, they are recruiters, right? And they are executives. Now, most people spend a lot of their time in the kitchen, right? But to get to the level where you want to go, to actually get to those upper levels of success in restaurants, you can't be in the kitchen all of the time, right? And so you have to work your way out of that. And here's why I say the recruiting is so important, is because you can never leave the kitchen if you don't have the right team. And one of the most common things I know with, your experience talking to restaurant owners and mine is just that is a common challenge everywhere. Now, albeit it's harder for seasonal restaurants, but for everyone. How do we find the staff that are going to stay? How do we find the staff that are going to come in and do the job that I need them to, that I don't have to micromanage, so I don't have to get pulled in to doing it myself? And I will tell you what Ben hinted on here, again, having videos, talking about the culture and having the summer of their life. Basically what he's talking about here, something that we teach our clients, is that you want to be an employer of choice. And when I say that, we have to understand that recruiting is marketing, right? When it comes down to it, we need to make sure that we are showing people the best of what we have to offer, the reasons as to why they should want to work for you over 100 other places that they could go. Now, granted, for a seasonal restaurant, if you have to literally move your entire life for a summer, that's definitely a big thing to overcome. But even for you guys in a day-to-day environment, how is your job ad? How is your job title? How is everything in your communications with prospects? How is that all convincing them that you are the best place that they could possibly get a job at? And why should they want to work for you over all of the other places? Because if you do not do that, you are then going to get the candidates that are not your first choice, not your second choice, and ultimately That's why most people have staffing problems, is because they don't pay above the standard for that area. They pay below the standard, because you can't have exceptional people at unexceptional pay rates, because the best people are going to go for the best pay, right? It's what people will do. It's pretty obvious. So you can't expect to have amazing staff if you have less than an amazing job opportunity. So we always have to start with that. So I wanted to expand on that a little bit, just because it is so common for people. And if we actually have a restaurant that people want to work at, our lives get the hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, and it raises really three good points that I think, one actually I learned from you, and that's pay steps. So you had ironed out for your restaurants, like, hey, if you're able to do this, this is what we know we can pay you. And then once you learn this, then we can pay you this. And so that was something I developed a few years ago, and I actually got from you, is like, okay, as soon as, if you want to work in prep, this is what we can afford to pay you. And I looked at the business model, I looked at our sales, I looked at what our labor costs needed to be, and I broke down those steps. I also looked at what the competitors were paying to make sure that we were a dollar or two above them. And so for me, for example, it's like, okay, I know you want to make this much, but here's a way that we can get you there. And there's clear steps on how we can get you there. So we have a certification system where we have someone going around and training people. And once you're certified in that station, boom, there's your raise. Okay, the next one. Okay, now you got to go get certified in ovens. Now you get to the next one, then to fryers, then to saute and grill. What that does is it gives people a clear pathway, and it also gives the business, hey, listen, okay, yeah, if you're certified on all those stations, we're going to pay you up here. But from the business perspective, I know that in peak season, I now have 6 saute cooks. I used to rely on like 1 or 2 guys, and if 1 or 2 of those guys went down, or they were sick, or they quit, like, we were in a rough spot. And now I've got like 6 saute cooks that can hop on any time of day, and rock out a solid meal period. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when you talked about hiring the right people and really trying to be that elevated workplace, the reason why we actually lose so much money in staff housing is because for my managers, I comp their housing. What an incredible perk. Costly. Very, very costly, especially if you're in the Hamptons of Ontario. However, for the top 5 people, and again, we're running with probably a bigger management team than both. We're doing about $4 million in sales. So I'm running 5 full-time front office managers.
And so let's put that in perspective. $4 million over how many months?
6 months, but in our peak week, we'll do $250,000 in sales on like our biggest peak season. So the majority of that happens July and August. So 60 days, we're on an hour and a half wait every single meal period for 10 weeks straight.
Yeah. Okay.
So what we do is we comp, once I find that manager, because those managers, the hourly staff are going to come and go. They're going to be students. I try to pick up students in their first year. I go, oh, your first year. Okay, great. We could have a good run with you. But those managers are going to be, the ones that come back year after year. You really want to incentivize them well. And what an incredible incentive then. Hey, listen, you're going to have a free place to live on the lake, walkable to work. It's going to be incredible. You're going to have the best time. So those 5 people really allow you to get out of the kitchen, me to get out of the office, and to focus on building the business as opposed to being in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's some great stuff there, but now it hasn't always been easy. I remember you telling me about a few, things that happened. And so was there some sort of a fire? Tell me about that.
There's been several fires. So, I was at my height a few years ago at 4 restaurants. I'm down to 2 now. One of them caught on fire, and we're still untangling from that from an insurance perspective. And I don't wish that upon anyone, but there's a lot of good learning lessons. And then the other fire we had was actually one of our staff houses. So 9 p.m. at night, I finish a peak season day. I sit down from a heck of a day. I literally sit down in the office, and someone runs in and says, Ben, the mansion's on fire. And the mansion is 23 dorm style rooms, and we have 23 people living there. So I get up and I start running, and it's like half a kilometer away, but I just start running uphill to get there, and I can see the flames. They're 40, 50 feet high. And so now we have 23 people of our staff that are homeless in the middle of peak season, which there is already a housing crisis. And so where are we going to fit these people?
Let's go back a second. I want to go into this. So as you're running towards this and you're seeing the flames, like, what's going through your mind at that point?
Well, number one, I hope everyone's safe. It's 9 p.m. at night. Like, is someone, like, thankfully, this is not 11 o'clock at night. This is not midnight. Yeah. It's 9 p.m. So everyone was out of the building. Everyone was safe. So that was the first thing that's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, okay, what do you do now? There's no playbook for this.
Yeah.
So we decided to close the restaurant, which that is one of my mantras, never close your restaurant. Even in the depths of COVID, like, the labor crisis, everything's going, we were always open 7 days a week. You never want to close. That night we decided to close. We hosted everyone in and had to figure out where everyone was going to stay that night.
What an incredible just situation and how how you've got 23 people that you're responsible for housing that are key parts of your business, and all of a sudden what do you do? So what did you do?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So the sentiment originally was, hey, well, I could have heard grumblings like, well, that's it for our summer. We'll pack it up and just go home. That's it. And that would have meant like all my kitchen staff live in the walkable accommodation. So that was like half of my kitchen was gone. That was our business was like the year was done. Like that would have been, and I said, well, we're a family. Let's work this out and let's figure this all out. And so when it was all said and done, what happened was I made a plea to the community. We did a fundraiser, and the community was incredible at raising funds because a lot of these staff didn't have content insurance, so we got them as much cash as we could to make up for what they had lost. And then I said, hey, if you guys have rooms, if the community has rooms or houses, like I need all we can get here. And so the community came together. I remember one of the staff houses we ended up renting in a hurry. I couldn't get all the approvals all the way up the line. I just signed it myself personally. It took as much as the bank would give me that day. I put it down on a deposit, and that housed 10 people right there. So we pieced it all together. We came together, and in the end, not one person left for the summer until their contract was done. So that was an incredible win for us. And it would, the weeds don't seem as weedy when you've been through that kind of thing together. So the team actually came together, and it was an incredible summer to work. Everyone was so close.
Yeah, we've survived a fire. Like, we can handle this rush. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
And for you too, like, even then the challenges that you go through after that, you're like, well, nobody's on fire. Nobody's, it's not life threatening. So I think that's just an incredible story, and something that most of us, don't have to go through. Most of us have been through experiences like, you get robbed. I've been robbed, oh goodness, like 3 or 4 times. It's always like a kick in the gut, whenever that happens. And, most of us have had people steal from us. Most of people have had, like key people quit, and so there's been all these things that you get used to, but there's never been a fire for like where 23 of your team lives. So that's, that is even something that, would crush the best of us. And yet, you were able to keep it together and handle it. So, if there was restaurant medals, you should probably get a little restaurant medal there. I'll have to create a big restaurant association and give you one. But anyway, I just always found that incredible. So I thank you so much for sharing that story. And, so looking at seasonal restaurants, I want to hammer out a couple other tips that we can give to people, and then I want to talk a little bit more about you personally. So tell me, aside from the housing side, what are some other things that another seasonal restaurant owner, if it was you in your very first year and you were talking to you, what advice would you give to a very young and good looking Ben Devlin?
I would say hire for peak season. I see this problem around often is you don't want to hire for what you need for the spring. You want to hire for your peak season numbers. So you work it backwards. So, okay, for me, I'm going to do $250,000 a week in sales in peak season. How many people do I actually need? So put down pen to paper. Okay, I need 13 servers. I need 4 service bartenders. I need this, that, and the other. Set your par levels. Now go out and hire for those. Now, when you're hiring, one thing that we do, and this has been a huge change in our business, is We let everyone know, listen, in May and June, it's going to be part-time hours. It's going to be a time for you to enjoy your time in Muskoka, get familiar, get really good at your job, and we really all make our money in that 2-month period. But what we like to do is I reach out to other business owners that are actually need people in May and June. So, for example, marinas need to clean a ton of boats, and they need to summarize them and get them in the water. So they have this glut of labor that they need for May and June, but that they don't necessarily need for peak season. So we look at businesses that yin and yang with us. And again, this is not a revenue driving activity. What it is I'm putting my football coach hat on, and I'm saying, what's going to limit churn? What's going to limit churn is putting money in people's pockets and making sure that they're well fed and make a ton of money. And it allows you to hire for those peak season levels without having a mutiny in May and June of people who can't pay for staff housing.
Yeah, and without having to pay them the entire time to have those labor levels at peak season levels, even when your revenue isn't there. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big one. And then, just timelines. January 1st, you should be launching your hiring. Those candidates that start looking for jobs January 1, those are the most organized. Those are the most proficient. Those are the most mature. Those are the most, I've always got the best candidates. If you're waiting till March to get your candidates, I'm going to just wager a bet here that they're not going to be as organized or as efficient or as good of staff members as the ones that you hire in January. So those would be my top two that I would really, say that I see often that those kind of things aren't happening.
Well, I mean, and let's look at this too. So for most places in your area, your peak again is July and August. So summertime, and even like May and June to an extent, like for me, my peak was always May. And so the thing is, you need to hire in advance of when you actually need the people. And a lot of people don't get this. A lot of people start hiring when they start getting 2-week notices or resignations or when their sales start picking up. By that time, it's already too late. Right? If you know that your peak season is going to be in May or it's going to be in June, you need to be getting out 2 or 3 months ahead of that because it's going to take time to interview people, hire them. It's going to take time to train them. And so if you are starting that process when you already need people, you are just putting yourself in an emergency scenario where you're always just going to be coming from behind. You're not going to train them as well as you would like. You're going to select the wrong people because you just need bodies on the floor. And so we're just making poor decisions. And it all comes back to planning. And so if you know when those peak seasons are, you want to be able to make those changes in advance. And I will tell you that since I started hiring in advance of when I needed people, my business was never the same. I was never in the same stressful scenarios. I was never forced to go back and work on the floor nearly as much. It was a pretty easygoing time. Like, because right now, in a lot of April and May scenarios for a lot of restaurant owners, they all get sucked back into the business because their sales go up and their staff turnover. So that just forces them to try and get by and survive. And that's not a way to make money because when you're just trying to get by, you're not focused on your profitability. You're not focused on capitalizing on those opportunities. Whereas, like, I'll tell you something, for you, Ben, in that July and August period, if all of a sudden your team is upselling to the max that they possibly can, and you're able to get your average checkup, by $1 or $2, because you're serving so many covers during that time, that means so much more to your bottom line than what you might be doing at the start or the end of your season, right? That's the time, you want to, is it bale hay when the sun shines or make hay when the sun shines? That's what you got to do. You got to make sure that you're actually doing the stuff when it's going to have the max impact. And so that's just an example. Whereas if you're just stuck on surviving, you're not going to be focused on it. You're not going to do it. And ultimately your P&L will suffer year over year. So that's it's such a huge thing to talk about. Okay. So far we've talked about, hiring in advance. We've talked about, staff housing. We've talked about fires in the business. We've talked about kind of how you got to where you are. And I think those are some really, really, really crucial stories. But I want to go to another scenario of yours as well. And I want to kind of walk through, some things that maybe you do that maybe other restaurant owners don't. So now, you were in an ATV accident, and it's hard to walk. And I remember, shortly thereafter, you had your first child. And so there's been some really difficult situations for you over time because you were still running that restaurant, and barely being able to walk. So it's not like you could run in and help a whole lot, right? I will say that you did look like a mafia boss with that cane, but I want to ask, what are some of the things that kept you going despite the challenges, despite the things that were happening? What kept you centered? What kept you going during those times? Hey, real quick. What if you could identify thousands in hidden profits, optimize your food and labor costs, and know exactly what moves to make next to grow your restaurant business, all in less time than it takes to drink your morning coffee? That's exactly why I created the Restaurant Weekly Financial Tracker. It's free and available on the link that's in the description. Grab your free copy now and focus in on your restaurant's profitability today.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the biggest thing that being a restaurateur has taught me is resourcefulness. And we need to, no matter what the situation that faces us, because if you are in our line of industry, and you know this very well, you will get thrown curveballs that you do not have a playbook for, whether it's a fire, whether you can't walk without a cane, and whether you have a kid. And so there are curveballs that will come your way continually. And the best thing you can be, if you can be nothing else, is resourceful. And so for me, making sure that, we take, number one, full accountability and responsibility, radical responsibility. Everything is my fault. That sounds kind of weird to say, or it might kind of sound weird to hear. But taking radical responsibility for everything in your restaurant and not just blaming all the staff, this and this. Yeah, well, I know that's staff. They need to be managed. And sometimes what I really learned in that season is the depth in which you need to go to manage even top players. One of my top guys is a very, very proficient general manager who was an old friend of mine, was actually my general manager back in the day. I brought in during that season as kind of a hired gun. He, for example, was not great with emails. And so I was like, okay, what can I do to help you to make sure that you are answering your emails on time? This is a very well-paid hired gun. And so I said, listen, I'm going to block off, you put some time to block off in your calendar each day, and I'm going to check in with you at the end of the block to make sure that those emails are followed up on and answered. And so I think what a younger Ben maybe would have benefited from, and I think probably a lot of restaurateurs might benefit from, is recognizing the level of depth of which you need to go in to manage even those key players that you think, we pay them enough, they should be. Well, they have strength in other areas. No one's ever a perfect player, and they do need to be managed. And taking radical responsibility to manage your top players, here's the thing. The better those players are, I have found, sometimes the harder they are to manage. Those ponies that can run really fast sometimes need those blinders on, and you really need to manage them well. And so learning to manage a team of, at my peak of 4 restaurants when I couldn't walk, I had 4 general managers. We were, upwards of 20 managers at the time. And so that takes a lot of following up. And if you have to cook at one restaurant with no leg and you have 4 of them, it's absolutely impossible. So I needed to take radical responsibility for where I was at, number one. Number two, we had to, not bemoan the fact that we needed to be all over our players and manage them to get the results that we want. And to be resourceful and find out unique solutions to unique problems, because we face them every day. Whether it's you getting robbed, whether it's me with a fire, there's going to be situations that happen that you don't have a playbook for. And we need to be resourceful in those times to make sure that we can deliver.
Yeah, and I love what you said about radical accountability, because it is so common to be like, well, this happened or that happened, or the economy or food costs. And so, yes, all of those things are true. And what did you do about it? So I think that's the piece that misses it, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, the reason I'm not successful is this. Well, at the end of the day, the factors that are there are the factors that you are up against. But it's still what you do in spite of those factors that will dictate your success or failure. Because most of the time, yes, you have a staff house burning down. You could have easily called it and been like, sorry, guys, I guess we're just going to go under because now we lost half my staff. We're just not going to make money. But how do you handle a situation in that? Well, you got to figure it out sometimes, and that resourcefulness is huge. But, and it would be easy to say, oh, well, I can't believe that they did this. Someone stupid, set the fire. They were probably smoking a little something and, then whatever the reason was. But at the end of the day, if you get caught up on that and blame everyone else, well, at the end of the day, you're still the one that gets to solve the problem. Because as business owners, guess what? It doesn't matter what happens to you. What matters is how you respond to it. Because guess what? If you don't respond appropriately, your business goes under. And that's still on you. You're still the one that has this responsibility. That is your job. And I hear people all the time saying, well, they should know how to check their emails, or they should know how to do this. Well, guess what? They don't. So what are you going to do about that to make sure that happens? I even had one of my coaches basically just had an issue with time management. And I literally he was feeling overwhelmed with all the stuff he had to do. And so literally I just, had a call with him like, hey man, let's just list everything out that you got to do. Okay. Now let's go and find time in your calendar when you're going to do it. And I want you to send me an update at the end of that. And if you don't, I'm going to call you and just ask you what you did. And this is a very, very good guy. And, but sometimes it takes that little bit of coaching because no one, even Olympic athletes, they still need coaching. There's still ways that they can improve, but I love the radical accountability, and especially when it comes to staff. Oh, well, this person, quit. And so then you say, oh, well, they shouldn't have been here anyway. Well, who hired them, right? Who trained them? And if it was one of your managers, okay, well, who trained that manager on how to hire, right? Who hired that manager? Because at the end of the day, that all leads back to us. And we are the ones that by our action or inaction will dictate the success of our business. And the more we spend time blaming other things, the less time we spend looking in the mirror and then making the changes we need to. I could have easily blamed, whether it be I could blame my lack of sales in my first restaurant for 100 different factors. But at the end of the day, I had to figure out a way to make it happen. And if I just sat there and hung my head and cried every day, well, guess what? I'd be out of business now, right? So the sooner we say, okay, this situation sucks. Okay, now that I've said that, that's done. Okay, now what are we going to do to fix it, right? Oh, I work too much in the kitchen because I don't have staff that I can rely on. Okay, so then the issue is that you don't have reliable staff. Okay, well, let's get some reliable staff so you don't have to do it anymore. Oh, well, then I don't have time to hire them. Well, you got to find time, right? Because otherwise you just keep stuck in this circle that goes around and around and around, and you never get out of it. I see so many business owners eventually decide to sell their business, again, for less than what they think they can sell it for because it's based on cash flow. And most of the time people are selling, it's because it's not making money and they're burnout. It's because they haven't solved the problems in their business. And if they did solve the problems in their business, they wouldn't be wanting to sell. So many clients come on and they're like, man, this is my last chance before I just give up and sell. And then 4 months later, I asked them, hey, man, so you still want to sell? And they're like, no, I love my business now, right? It's just because they hadn't solved the problems in the business because they didn't know how. And not knowing how is okay, but it's still your responsibility to find out how, right? So anyway, sorry, I got a little tangent going there, but I think it's just so crucial is that we need to take that responsibility. And our business is a reflection of us and the knowledge we have and the actions we take. I said this as a quote the other day. The highest, I think it was, you can't have a highly profitable restaurant without highly profitable restaurant owner habits, right? If you do the things that other highly profitable restaurant owners do, you have a far higher likelihood of being a highly profitable restaurant owner. But if you do the things that unprofitable restaurant owners do, you will likely then be unprofitable as well. Because it comes down to your habits and the things that happen. It's not about how you feel about it. It doesn't matter if you feel that your product's the best or that, you work so hard. You working so hard doesn't matter, right? It's about the results that you working harder achieves. And so are you working harder in the right places, right? That's the question, because we feel maybe we should be more profitable. Well, you're not. So clearly there's an issue there. So how do we fix that issue? So anyway, okay. So I want to switch gears for a little bit. Because you're saying that you're doing $250,000 per week, and I've talked to some restaurant owners doing $250,000 in a year, and you're doing that in a week. So, I mean, aside, putting everyone on caffeine pills to get them to go really fast. What are some tips and things that you've done to be able to have that bigger efficiency during those peak times? Because obviously, if your ticket times go up too much, you lose a significant amount of money. You can't turn the tables. You already have a wait. So what are a few things that you've done to really bring your service times down, to stay efficient in those periods that other restaurant owners can learn from?
It's a good question. And there was two really big turning points for us. First was I had to realize that our chain really didn't, you superimpose the model on what our needs were, and it didn't perfectly fit. So I needed to look at, because of the level and the volume that we were doing, and we were doing it with the seasonal staff, we needed to look at our production of food similar to an assembly line. And every second counts. So we looked at ways that we could cook more effectively without dropping quality. We looked at limiting cross-section plating. So, for example, the plates that needed to be multiple stations, well, do we have to eliminate those, or how can we do it all on one station? And so every single second counts. So from we did a deep dive. This was a good 5-6 years ago now, where I did a big deep dive on the way that we were operating in the kitchen, and I just watched everything, and we looked at ways that would just make things more efficient without a significant drop in quality. And then the second thing was happened 2 years ago is I was sitting down with a friend of mine and having coffee, who runs a much larger organization, and he knows our establishment well and visits it, and just kind of talking through some of the scenarios that I was facing. And one thing he said to me that kind of set off a light for me is, he said, do you want to deliver 100% of your items 80% of the time, or do you want to deliver 80% of your items 100% of the time? And that one change there, we went, and the next year we deleted things off of our menu that I never thought they would be. I thought they would be staples until we were there, and when we weren't there anymore, they would be gone as well. But we made some hard choices. Was there some pushback from guests? Yes, absolutely, on some cravables that people have come to love. Was there some sacrifice involved? Yes. But guess what? Our wait times went down significantly. The amount that we were able to burn and turn and do sales in a day went up significantly, and profitability obviously followed.
Yeah, and that's the tough choices that I think people are really afraid to make sometimes, right? And we have to really figure out what are we optimizing for, because the way that we've always done it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get somewhere good. It just means you're going to get to the same place you've always been. Right. So I think that was crucial. Now, something that's come up in this conversation, you've mentioned some of your biggest turning points were actually through talking to other people who have a bit of a different vantage point than you do, or might have a different perspective, or might have learned some lessons. And so that has been some of the major shifts for you. Now, the reason I wanted to hone in on this is because so often in restaurant ownership, I don't know if you were ever like this, but I prided myself on doing it all myself. I prided myself on being like, I'm a self-made man. Like I've did it all myself. I'll work any position. I'll do the lowly jobs. I'll do all of it. Oh, anyone else who has a more successful restaurant, oh, well, they just don't understand what I'm dealing with. There's no way they could know what I'm dealing with. And so I would laugh at them. Oh, you don't work in your restaurant 80 hours a week? You're not a real restaurant owner then, right? Those were the scripts that were in my brain until I realized that people had figured out stuff that I hadn't figured out, and I was the one who was punishing myself for no reason, because there's no badge of honor for working 80 hours a week. There's no badge of honor for missing time with your family. There's no badge of honor for being poor as a restaurant owner and having everyone else make more than you. There's no badge of honor for that, right? But we tell ourselves those things to make ourselves feel better in the moment. And so why I wanted to point this out is because even for me, as I have grown in my journey, I have found that I always want to listen to people because they're going to see the world a little bit differently than the way I do. They're going to see things that I don't see. They are going to believe things that maybe I don't believe to be true. Like, and I said this on another episode. It's like, I didn't think that a restaurant owner could make more than $100,000 a year. And until I believed that that was possible, well, guess what? I never made more than $100,000 a year as a restaurant owner. But once I believed it was possible, I started figuring, okay, well, how do we make that happen, right? How could that be possible? And I think it's the change between that's not possible to how could that be possible was one of the biggest shifts that I made, right? And so once I questioned everything that I truly believed, I realized that a lot of things were just scripts that I had in my own head that kept me comfortable where I was. And comfort, I began to find, was the enemy. And so I wanted to ask you, so who are the people that you listen to, or even what questions do you ask some of those mentors, and how do you find them, and what has been your experience on that journey of learning that's helped take you from the young Ben who is, working summers trying to pay for university to now being a successful restaurant owner and having a life where you can be a snowbird and then work during the summer and all that kind of stuff, and a wonderful family. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I stand here on the shoulder of giants, and so it's there's so many people around me. Like, I have a network, and I'm very fortunate, very blessed to have people that I could call right now. And that comes with, I think it comes naturally to a restaurateur, but it certainly comes natural to me to serve others. I find my purpose in the service of others. So I think through that journey, I have been able to get in contact and develop a lot of relationships where I'm not expecting anything back. I like just doing things. That's why I'm in the restaurant business to begin with. That's why I'm natural to it, and I love it so much, and I find it so fulfilling, even though it can be hard. And a cruel mistress sometimes, the restaurant business. But if you find the purpose in the service of others, then it's all worth it. And so through that, I have found a whole network of people that I am able to pick up the phone and will pick up the phone for me and roll the ball around in ideas. And I come to every situation without an ego. And I think when you're young in your career, it's like you were saying, it's I work 80 hours, I'm a self-made man. No. Forget that, man. I am only successful because I have great people in my life that have blessed me with all the knowledge that they have and the hardships that they have faced. And I do the same too, is that, I have people that I spend time with that are farther down the journey and down the path than I am. And then I have people, and I make a habit of people that are earlier on in their journey and that I'm pouring out into. And then, the other portion of time is kind of where I'm at and working on my projects, but it's really coming to it without an ego, asking questions. And I think younger me would be surprised at how people are willing to help. I've asked you questions, you're completely related to other things, and you always pick up and always answer with great questions. And, people ask me, young guys ask me stuff all the time. I'm an open book. I'm like, how can I help you in this next step in your journey? And I think, asking questions and being open to being wrong and being able to look at things from different people's perspective. And it's not about whose idea it is. It's just about what's the best idea. It's dropped this whole thing. This is my idea. My ego is attached to it. It's natural to want to do that, but you got to drop that and say, it's not about my idea or his idea or her idea. It's just about what's the best idea, and what's going to produce us the result, and let's go do that.
Yeah. And so, okay, let me ask you a question here, because I sometimes get this. I sometimes have people tell me, "Oh, Andrew, the stuff that you teach, I've done that before. You talk about kitchen efficiency. Oh, my kitchen's already efficient." Right? And so let me ask you, because what you're saying is that for the longest time, you thought your kitchen was efficient, and then you questioned that assumption. How can we be more efficient? And then you questioned it again. How can we become even more efficient? And so, what does that journey look like? And I guess, for others that might think, oh, I'm already doing all the things, I'm already doing all the stuff, but their business still isn't where they want it to be. It's not profitable. Like the customer, experience isn't where they want it to be. They're still working so many hours. What would you say to someone like that? But when they're wholeheartedly believing these things that they're telling themselves, what would you say to someone like that?
I remember when I was laid up with after my injury, and I was watching a lot of TV at that time, and I was like, there is nothing left out there for me to watch. I'm like, there is nothing at all. Like, I've watched it all. There's nothing. There's always something. Dig deeper. There's always something. There's always something really entertaining out there to watch. Just dig deeper. And so I bring that philosophy now to business. There's always something. I have been at this same restaurant that we're talking about right now, going into 16 years. I always come up with kind of a motto for the summer, before the summer happens. So to give you an example, one year was 3 clean. So it was 3 million, and we're going to do it clean because the seasonal restaurant, 750 people a day. The place was never clean. I was a young guy. It just wasn't where I wanted to be. So we were going to do 3 million clean. So that was our theme for the summer. Last year was the revolution. We revolutionized the way we did things last year. This year is 4 tight. So we're going to do 4 million, but we're going to do it tight. And what I mean by that is there are screws everywhere that need to be screwed down, whether it's a quarter point in labor here, whether it is the way we look at maintenance and maintenance scheduling. We look at our social media and ways we can up that and bring in traffic. Monday mornings, can we build that meal period? There is an unlimited... The good thing about the restaurant business, you'll never be bored because there is always something to screw down. And so if you don't feel as if you have anything to do, and there's nothing to screw down, ask someone honestly and put your ego aside and ask someone who's really good in the restaurant business or who might be a little bit further down the path to give you that critique and say, hey, where do you think I could screw things down a little bit more? Where do you see those friction points in the guest experience? Hey, look at my P&L. Where do you see a little extra room? Because one thing I learned that really changed my view of looking at a P&L is that if you sell an extra dollar, okay, if your EBIT is 10%, okay, 10 cents goes to the bottom line. But if you save $1, 100% of that goes to the bottom line. So it's those things that really tighten up and come at it with no ego. And if you're stuck on something, I promise you, think harder, look deeper, because there is always a screw to screw down.
Yeah. And so now Ben is a fan of reality TV, and that's what he was able to find extremely. No, just kidding. But awesome, man. No, I love that. Right. We have to keep looking. And I have even taken my businesses and let's say the coaching business, for example. I took it to some people that are way ahead of me, and I literally said, hey man, here's all of our numbers. Like, what am I missing? Like, what needs to change here? And they're like, oh, that's easy. Just do this, and this. Here's 4 things, and all of a sudden you'll grow by X amount in the next 6 months. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. I hadn't thought of that. And so it's just questioning those assumptions as a way to grow. Because if we stay stuck doing the same things and we blame everything else, then we will ultimately stay the same. We have to be open to change. We have to be open to doing things differently because that's how change occurs. And the status quo isn't going to get you where you want to go. And I totally intended to make that rhyme. So awesome. Ben, thank you for being here. It was an absolute pleasure. I know it's been a while since we connected, but this has been great. And I hope everyone out there is learning a little bit more about seasonal restaurants and a few things they can do to make things better. So Ben, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, man. It's always great to chop it up with you and great to see you and hear where you are on your journey. And I've learned a lot from you as well. So it's always good to catch up and reconnect.
Awesome, guys. So tune in to the next episode, but we would also appreciate if you took a minute to give us a review, share this with someone else that you think could find value in what we're doing, and we'll see you on the next one. This episode is brought to you by Ownershift Training, where we help restaurant owners increase their profits while spending more time with their family. And if you want to know exactly what it would take to grow your profit margin to 15% and beyond while spending more time with your family, my team has a few spots open this week for a free 15-minute restaurant assessment call. Just click the book a call link in the description and we'll show you the exact frameworks we're using to help our clients do this in as little as 6 to 8 weeks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.